My roommate stole my app idea, then launched it. Later, I found his hidden crypto account. I never thought betrayal would feel like a punch to the gut, but there I was, reeling from the shock. Just days after sharing my app idea with my roommate, Jake, I stumbled upon a sleek website showcasing a product that looked eerily familiar. My heart raced as I read the tagline, "Revolutionizing your daily routine." It was my tagline, my vision, and my blood, sweat, and tears. The app was everything I had dreamed of, yet it bore Jake's name. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I clicked through the pages, each click driving a dagger deeper into my chest. I had confided in him, trusted him with my most vulnerable idea, and now he was parading it around as his own. I could hardly breathe, my mind racing with disbelief and anger. We had been friends for years, sharing late-night brainstorming sessions and countless cups of coffee. I had never imagined he would cross that line. In my gut, I knew I had to confront him, but a part of me was still hoping it was all just a misunderstanding. Maybe he had come across my idea independently, but deep down I knew that was a flimsy excuse. I waited until evening when the apartment was quiet, the soft hum of the city outside our window, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Jake was lounging on the couch, his laptop open, a satisfied grin plastered on his face. I hesitated, searching for the right words, but they felt trapped in my throat. Instead, I took a deep breath and asked, "Jake, can we talk?" He looked up, confusion washing over his face. "Sure, what's up?" I gestured toward the laptop, my voice trembling slightly. "Did you launch an app? The one we talked about?" His smile faltered, but he quickly regained composure. "Yeah, I did. It's been in the works for a while now." The way he said it felt rehearsed, like he had been preparing for this moment. I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes, but he masked it with bravado. You know how the startup world is. Ideas are everywhere, man. You just have to act fast. I clenched my fists, feeling a mixture of rage and disbelief. "But you took my idea, Jake. You know that, right?" He shrugged, a nonchalant gesture that felt like a slap in the face. "Ideas are just ideas until you do something with them. I took the initiative. You should have done the same." My heart sank as I realized he wasn't going to admit to anything. This was going to be a battle of wills, and I felt utterly unprepared. After that conversation, I found myself pacing the small living room, my mind racing. I needed proof, something tangible to back up my claims. I recalled every detail of our discussions, every sketch I'd shared, but nothing felt concrete enough to confront him further. I couldn't let this slide. I had to dig deeper. The next day, I started my investigation. I spent hours scrolling through tech forums and startup websites, searching for any trace of Jake's app. I wanted to know when he had registered it, how he had gone about it, and if there were any signs that he had stolen my idea. Each new page I opened felt like a desperate grasp at hope, but all I found was a polished presentation of my dreams. As I delved deeper, I stumbled upon a forum thread discussing the app's launch date. It was listed as 2 weeks ago, the exact timeline that lined up with my discussions with Jake. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This was no coincidence. It was a calculated move. He had taken my idea and raced to market, leaving me in the dust. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I glanced at Jake, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. The camaraderie we once shared was now tainted with suspicion and betrayal. I began to notice small things, his late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. My gut twisted with the thought that I was not just dealing with a friend, but a competitor willing to do anything to win. I needed help, someone who could guide me through this murky situation. I reached out to a tech-savvy friend, Maya, who had experience with startups. Over coffee, I laid out the whole story, my voice shaking with frustration. She listened intently, her brow furrowing as I recounted the timeline of events. "This is serious, man. You need to gather evidence before confronting him again," she advised. Maya's words echoed in my mind as I left the cafe. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just going to sit back and let Jake take what was rightfully mine. I would gather everything I could, emails, sketches, anything that could prove my idea was original. I had to be strategic, careful not to alert him to my suspicions. As the days passed, I became a shadow in my own home, meticulously documenting everything. I combed through old messages, revisiting the excitement we had shared over my app concept. Each text felt like a reminder of the trust one had placed in Jake, and it stung. I was becoming consumed by the need for justice, the desire to reclaim what was stolen from me. Yet, with each passing day, I felt the weight of uncertainty bearing down on me. What if I was wrong? What if Jake had genuinely created something independently? The thought gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't let doubt cloud my judgment. I had to keep my focus on the evidence, the facts, and the truth. The next few days felt like an emotional roller coaster, each moment dragging me deeper into a pit of confusion. I watched Jake from a distance, trying to decipher if there was any flicker of guilt in his eyes when he discussed the app. Instead, he seemed more confident than ever, pitching his vision to anyone who would listen. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing my grip on reality. Was I the only one who could see through his facade? I decided to dig deeper, starting with the app's website. It was sleek and professional, the kind of design that would take hours to perfect. But as I navigated through the pages, I noticed something strange. The testimonials seemed too polished, almost scripted. I took screenshots of the site, making mental notes of every detail that felt off. Something was clearly amiss, but what could I do with just a hunch? The following evening, I invited my friend Sam over, hoping his tech-savvy brain could help me unravel this mess. As we sat on the couch, I shared my concerns, outlining everything I had observed. Sam raised an eyebrow, skeptical at first, but his interest peaked when I mentioned the testimonials. You know, there are ways to track down the origin of those reviews, he said, pulling out his laptop. Let's see if we can find anything unusual. We spent hours combing through online databases and social media platforms, searching for any hint of Jake's supposed success. My heart raced as we stumbled upon a forum where a user had posted about the app just days after Jake launched it. The post was glowing, almost too good to be true. Sam leaned closer, squinting at the screen. This user has no history. They just created their account to promote the app. It's like they're a ghost. As the pieces began to come together, a wave of unease washed over me. Was Jake fabricating his entire success? I had to confront him again, but this time I needed to be armed with evidence. I couldn't just accuse him without something concrete to back me up. Sam suggested I start tracking the app's downloads and user reviews more closely, as they could provide a clearer picture of its reception and authenticity. Over the next few days, I set up alerts for the app on various platforms, monitoring any new reviews or mentions. The more I looked, the more I realized that the app was gaining traction, but the reviews were oddly similar in language and sentiment. It was as if someone was orchestrating a campaign to make it seem more popular than it actually was. I could feel my stomach knotting with each new discovery. The stakes were getting higher. Then, one evening, I found something that sent chills down my spine. I was scrolling through a tech news site when I stumbled upon an article about a cryptocurrency linked to startup investments. The piece mentioned a wallet address that was tied to several successful app launches, including Jake's. My heart raced as I copied the address, knowing I had to dig deeper. Was he funneling money from this crypto account into his own pockets? I shared my findings with Sam, and we decided to investigate the wallet address further. It took hours of research, but we finally traced it back to a series of transactions that led directly to Jake's name. The implications were staggering. Not only had he stolen my idea, but he was also profiting from it in ways I had never imagined. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. I had to confront him, but how could I do it without exposing myself to more heartache? I spent the night pacing, running through scenarios in my mind. Each confrontation I imagined left me feeling more vulnerable, but I couldn't back down. I had to be strategic. If I confronted him without solid proof, he could easily twist the narrative. I needed to gather everything I had before making my move. It was time to play this game on my terms, but I was running out of time. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting Jake directly, I reached out to a few trusted contacts in the startup community, seeking their opinions on his app. I crafted a casual inquiry, asking if they had heard of any rumors surrounding the app's launch. Their responses were mixed, some praising it while others expressed skepticism. It was a small victory, but it made me feel less isolated in my doubts. As I continued my investigation, I noticed Jake becoming increasingly secretive. He started shutting his office door during meetings, and his phone seemed to be glued to his hand. Each time I caught a glimpse of him typing, my heart would race. Was he trying to cover his tracks? The tension between us was palpable, a silent war brewing beneath the surface. I could feel the air thickening with every passing day, and I knew I had to act soon. I spent my evenings gathering all the evidence I could find, screenshots, articles, and the transaction history from the crypto wallet. I felt like a detective piecing together a puzzle, but the weight of the betrayal hung heavily on my shoulders. Each new discovery reminded me of the trust one had placed in Jake, and the reality of our friendship felt like a cruel joke. How had I let it come to this? One afternoon, I decided to confront my feelings by writing everything down. I opened a document and poured my heart out, detailing the entire timeline of events. As I typed, I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I also recognized the sadness intertwined with it. I had once seen Jake as a partner in my dreams, and now he was the architect of my despair. This was no longer just about the app. It was about betrayal at its core. As I saved the document, I felt a flicker of resolve. I couldn't let this go unchallenged. With each passing day, I was inching closer to a confrontation, but I needed to be prepared. I had to gather enough evidence to make my case undeniable, not just for myself, but for the startup community that would inevitably be affected by Jake's actions. It was a heavy burden, but one I was willing to bear. With the weight of my findings pressing down on me, I decided it was time to dig deeper into Jake's operations. The hidden crypto account gnawed at my thoughts. It felt like the key to unraveling everything. I reached out to Lisa, a tech-savvy friend who had a knack for forensic digital investigations. If anyone could help me navigate the murky waters of cryptocurrency, it was her. We met at a small cafe, the kind that buzzed with the energy of entrepreneurs and dreamers. I laid out everything I had gathered so far, from Jake's suspicious behavior to the launch of the app under his name. Lisa listened intently, her brow furrowing as I recounted the details. When I mentioned the crypto account, her eyes lit up with a mix of intrigue and concern. If he's using that account to funnel profits from your idea, we need to trace it back to him, she said, her voice steady. I nodded, feeling a surge of hope. Together, we could connect the dots, expose Jake's deceit, and reclaim what was rightfully mine. Lisa promised to help me set up a digital trail to track the earnings from the app, and I felt a sense of urgency wash over me. As we worked late into the night, I scoured through Jake's social media and online presence. I needed to find anything that could tie him to the crypto account or the app's revenue. I discovered a few online forums where he had been active, discussing the app in a way that made it seem like it was his brainchild. Each post felt like a dagger, confirming my worst fears. He was trying to build a narrative that painted him as the innovator. Lisa was busy analyzing transaction patterns in the crypto account while I dove into Jake's past. I found out he had used a fake identity to register the app, a detail that made my stomach churn. The implications were staggering. He had created a facade to hide his theft. I could almost hear the gears in my mind turning, plotting how I would confront him with this evidence. After a few days of intense investigation, we had built a clearer picture. Lisa discovered that the crypto account had received multiple large deposits right after the app's launch. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was the kind of evidence that could expose Jake in a way that no mere accusation could. I saved the transaction history, making sure to document everything meticulously. One evening, as I was sifting through the details, I stumbled upon a comment from a user on one of Jake's posts. It mentioned a team he had worked with to develop the app, a group I had never heard of. My heart raced. Was he trying to shift the blame or cover his tracks? I needed to find out who these people were and if they were complicit in his deception. I reached out to a few contacts in the startup community, trying to gather intel on Jake's supposed team. The more I dug, the more I realized how isolated he had made himself. Most people had no idea he was working with anyone else. It was as if he had crafted a narrative that only served him, pushing everyone else away. I felt the anger boiling inside me. He was so confident in his deceit. Lisa and I scheduled another meeting to share our findings. I needed her expertise to decipher the layers of Jake's web. We met at the cafe again, and as I laid out my latest discoveries, I could see the wheels turning in her mind. If we can find out who these people are, we might be able to leverage that against him, she suggested, her eyes gleaming with determination. As we delved deeper into our investigation, I felt a sense of purpose rising within me. I was no longer just a victim. I was a fighter. Each new piece of evidence felt like a stepping stone toward reclaiming my idea. But with every step forward, I also felt the pressure mounting. I was playing a dangerous game, and Jake was not the type to back down easily. The stakes were rising, and I could sense that the confrontation would come sooner rather than later. I began to mentally prepare for how I would present my findings, crafting my narrative carefully. It was vital that I not only prove Jake's wrongdoing, but also ensure that the startup community understood the full extent of his betrayal. I envisioned the look on his face when I unveiled the truth, and it fueled my resolve. But even as I planned, a creeping doubt began to settle in. What if Jake had anticipated my moves? What if he had a counter-narrative ready to deflect the blame? I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always one step ahead, and that made me uneasy. I had to be meticulous, covering all my bases before making any bold moves. As the days turned into a week, the tension in our shared apartment became palpable. Jake was acting unusually friendly, almost as if he sensed the storm brewing. I had to keep my cool, maintaining the facade while secretly preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Each casual conversation felt like a high-stakes poker game. I couldn't afford to show my hand. With Lisa's help, I created a comprehensive dossier of all my findings, including screenshots, transaction histories, and Jake's online activity. I was ready to confront him, but I also knew that I needed to time it perfectly. The upcoming startup event was the ideal stage for this revelation. It would ensure that the community witnessed his downfall firsthand. As the event approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I had never been one for public confrontations, but this felt different. It was no longer just about me. It was about protecting the integrity of the startup community. I was ready to take a stand, to expose the truth, no matter the personal cost. The day of the startup event arrived, and the air felt charged with tension. I could hardly focus on anything else. My mind was racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. My friend Alex had been invaluable, helping me compile the evidence against my roommate, Jordan. The hidden crypto account was just the tip of the iceberg, but I needed more to ensure I could confront him effectively. As I scrolled through the app's analytics on my phone, I noticed a surge in downloads coinciding with the time Jordan had pitched the app to potential investors. The numbers were staggering, far exceeding what I had initially anticipated. Each download represented a person who believed in a product that was built on my idea, my passion. It was infuriating, but it also fueled my resolve. I couldn't let him get away with this. I decided to reach out to a few mutual friends in the startup community, people who had attended Jordan's pitch sessions. I needed to know what he had been telling them about the app, how he was framing his story. The more I gathered, the clearer it became that he had been spinning a narrative that painted him as the sole visionary behind the app. I felt sick to my stomach at the thought of how easily people had bought into his lies. When I finally met with one of those friends, Sarah, at a local cafe, I could hardly contain my anxiety. I asked her directly about Jordan's presentations, and her face shifted as she recalled how he had claimed to have developed the app from scratch. He mentioned some personal struggles, like losing a job, and how that motivated him, she said. My heart sank. It was a classic manipulation tactic, one that played on empathy while hiding the truth. As I listened to her recount Jordan's tales, a second twist hit me. If he had been fabricating a backstory, what else was he lying about? I felt the walls closing in, and I had to remind myself to breathe. This was more than just a stolen idea. It was a carefully constructed facade designed to win over investors and friends alike. I couldn't let him continue to deceive everyone, especially when they believed in him and his vision. I spent the next few days deep in research, trying to connect the dots between Jordan's claims and the reality of his actions. I combed through his social media, old posts, and even reached out to some of his past acquaintances. What I found was alarming. Jordan had a history of launching projects under pseudonyms, and there were whispers of failed ventures that he had conveniently left out of his narrative. It was as if he had been living a double life. With each new piece of information, the pressure mounted. I could feel the stakes rising, and it was becoming increasingly clear that I needed to act before Jordan had a chance to solidify his position in the startup community. I began crafting a presentation of my own, one that would lay bare the truth behind his deception. I wanted to expose him not just for me, but for everyone who believed in the integrity of our industry. The closer I got to the event, the more frantic my thoughts became. I had to ensure that my evidence was irrefutable. I enlisted Alex to help me create a visual presentation that would clearly outline the timeline of my app's development and the discrepancies in Jordan's story. Each slide felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, but the fear of confrontation loomed larger than ever. Wovey tried to spin the narrative in front of everyone. On the night of the event, the venue was packed with aspiring entrepreneurs, investors, and tech enthusiasts. As I watched Jordan confidently present his app, I felt a mix of rage and disbelief. He was charming the crowd, weaving tales that seemed almost plausible. I could see people nodding along, and it made my blood boil. Did they not see through his facade? Did they not know what I knew? As I waited for my moment, I noticed the energy in the room shift when Jordan mentioned the app's success. It was almost as if the crowd was under a spell, captivated by his words. But I knew the truth, and it was time to break that spell. I glanced at Alex, who gave me a nod of encouragement. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, heart pounding, ready to unveil the reality that lay beneath Jordan's polished exterior. The moment I stepped forward, I could feel the collective breath of the crowd hitch. Jordan's eyes darted to me, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before he masked it with a smile. "What's this?" "An unexpected guest," he said, trying to play it off. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands. This was my chance, and I had to seize it before he could regain control. As I approached the stage, the audience's curiosity shifted to concern. I was acutely aware of the stakes. This wasn't just about my stolen idea anymore. It was about the integrity of our entire community. "Jordan," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, "we need to talk about your app and where it really came from." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a mix of intrigue and disbelief. Jordan feigned surprise, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The app has been a labor of love, and the feedback has been incredible." He was deflecting, and I could see the cracks in his facade. I glanced at Alex, who was standing at the edge of the crowd, his expression a mix of concern and encouragement. I had to push further. I couldn't let him spin this narrative any longer. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You know, it's interesting how you've managed to launch this app so quickly, especially considering the late nights we spent brainstorming ideas together. But I found something you didn't expect." The crowd leaned in, their interest peaked. I pulled out my phone, ready to show them the evidence I had gathered over the past few days. Jordan's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger. "Evidence? What are you talking about? This is ridiculous." He was losing his grip, and I could sense the room's atmosphere shifting. I quickly brought up the crypto account I had discovered, the one tied to the app's earnings. "You mean this account? The one that's been raking in profits while you've been parading as the sole creator?" I asked, my voice rising above the murmurs. The crowd gasped, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Jordan's face paled, and for a moment, he looked genuinely rattled. "That's not what you think," he blurted out, but I pressed on. "It's exactly what it looks like. You've stolen my idea and monetized it without a second thought." The tension in the room was palpable, a mix of shock and disbelief that mirrored my own feelings. In that moment, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had to keep the momentum going. "And it's not just a crypto account," I continued, my heart racing. "You've used a fake identity to launch this app, a complete fabrication. Who are you really, Jordan?" The crowd was silent, the weight of my words sinking in. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, the connections forming as they processed the betrayal. Jordan's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape route. "This is just a misunderstanding," he stammered, but I could see the cracks in his confidence widening. He was losing control, and I wasn't about to let him regain it. "You can't just stand there and pretend you haven't betrayed me and everyone else who believed in you." I shot back, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. I could feel the crowd shifting, their loyalties teetering as they processed the unfolding drama. Some were whispering, others glancing at each other, their expressions a mix of disbelief and concern. This was more than just a personal betrayal. It was a challenge to the integrity of our entire startup ecosystem. I had to ensure that everyone knew the truth, that they understood the stakes involved. As I looked at Jordan, I could see the gears turning in his mind. He was trying to think of a way to manipulate the narrative to spin this in his favor. "You're just jealous because I succeeded where you didn't," he shot back, desperation creeping into his voice. It was a classic deflection, and I could see the audience starting to murmur again, some nodding along with his twisted version of events. But I wouldn't let him derail me. "Success built on deception isn't success at all, Jordan," I replied, my voice firm. "You can't steal someone's hard work and call it your own. The startup community deserves better than this." The crowd began to respond, some people nodding in agreement, others crossing their arms, clearly unsettled by the turn of events. Jordan's facade was crumbling, and I could see the panic in his eyes. "You're ruining everything," he shouted, his voice cracking. But I stood my ground, feeling the weight of my own truth behind me. I wasn't just fighting for my idea. I was fighting for my integrity, for the trust we all placed in each other as creators. The stakes had never felt higher. I took a step closer, lowering my voice, but making sure everyone could still hear me. "You might think you can manipulate this situation, but the truth is stronger than your lies. I've gathered evidence, and I won't stop until everyone knows who you really are." The audience was riveted, and I could sense the tide turning against him. Jordan's bravado was fading, replaced by a palpable fear. I could feel the energy in the room shifting, the crowd's loyalty hanging in the balance. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the integrity of our community, the principles we all stood for. I had to finish strong. "I'm calling for a full investigation into this app and its origins," I declared, my voice ringing out. "We need to ensure that no one else gets hurt by this kind of deceit." Jordan's face twisted in anger and desperation, but I could see the crowd had made their choice. The murmurs grew louder, and I could hear people discussing what had just unfolded. I had thrown the gauntlet down, and now it was time for the consequences to unfold. The room buzzed with energy, and I knew this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. The tension in the room felt electric, and I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just storm off in a huff after revealing the hidden crypto account. I needed to fortify my position. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could about Jordan's operation, looking for proof that would leave no room for denial. I reached out to a few trusted contacts in the startup community, hoping they could provide insight into Jordan's recent activities. One of my old college friends, Maya, was a whiz with data analytics and had a knack for digging up information. I explained the situation to her over coffee, the clinking of cups and chatter around us fading into the background as I laid out the details. She listened intently, her brow furrowing as I spoke. When I finished, she nodded and pulled out her laptop, ready to help me track down any financial irregularities related to the app. Maya's expertise was invaluable. We spent hours combing through online databases and social media accounts, piecing together a timeline of Jordan's actions since he launched the app. We discovered that he had registered the app under a different name, one I had never heard of before. The name was linked to a series of dubious tech ventures that had all failed, leaving a trail of disgruntled investors and abandoned projects. As we dug deeper, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could someone I considered a friend stoop so low? It was becoming clear that Jordan had not only stolen my idea, but had also crafted an entire persona around it. I began to wonder how many people had fallen for his facade, and if I was the only one who had been left in the dust. Each new piece of information only fueled my determination to expose him. Maya suggested we set a trap. She proposed that we create a fake investor profile to see how Jordan would react. If he was as shady as I suspected, he might reveal more about his operations during a meeting. I hesitated at first, but the thought of him getting away with this made my stomach churn. I needed to know what he was hiding, and this might be my best chance. We crafted a profile for Alex, a potential investor with deep pockets and an interest in tech startups. I made sure to give Alex a compelling backstory, one that would make Jordan eager to pitch his app. I felt a thrill of anticipation as I sent Jordan a message, posing as Alex and expressing interest in a meeting. The waiting game began, and I was on edge, checking my phone every few minutes for a response. When Jordan finally replied, his enthusiasm was palpable. He suggested we meet at a trendy cafe downtown, and I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. This was it. I would finally have the opportunity to confront him, even if it was indirectly. I spent the night before the meeting rehearsing what I would say, knowing that every word had to be carefully chosen to elicit the truth without revealing my hand. The day of the meeting arrived, and I dressed sharply, wanting to appear as credible as possible. As I walked into the cafe, I spotted Jordan already seated, tapping away on his laptop. He looked up and grinned, his charm radiating like a spotlight. I forced a smile, reminding myself of the stakes involved. This was more than just a meeting, it was a chess game, and I needed to stay several moves ahead. Jordan launched into his pitch the moment I sat down, excitedly showcasing the app's features and its potential for growth. I listened intently, trying to mask my growing unease. The way he spoke, with such confidence and flair, made it hard to reconcile the person in front of me with the backstabbing thief I knew him to be. I needed to steer the conversation in a direction that would reveal more of his true intentions. As we talked, I casually dropped hints about my previous experience with app development, gauging his reaction. I wanted to see if he would falter or show any signs of guilt. To my surprise, he leaned in closer, his eyes gleaming with interest, as if he saw me as a potential ally rather than a threat. I almost felt guilty for playing this game, but I reminded myself of the betrayal that had led me here. After some back and forth, I finally asked him about the crypto account, framing it as a casual inquiry about how he planned to fund the app's growth. His demeanor shifted slightly, but he quickly recovered, spinning a tale about the investment strategies he was using. I could tell he was lying, but he was good, too good. I needed something more concrete to catch him off guard. As the meeting wrapped up, I made sure to mention a few names of investors I had worked with in the past, hoping to plant seeds of doubt. Jordan seemed unfazed, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. I left the cafe feeling both exhilarated and anxious. I had gathered more information, but it wasn't enough. I needed a definitive proof, something that would expose him for the fraud he truly was. The next few days were a blur of activity. Maya and I continued our investigation, digging deeper into Jordan's past and the app's financial records. We discovered a series of anonymous transactions that pointed to the crypto account, but we still needed a direct link to tie it all together. It felt like we were so close yet so far, and the pressure was mounting. Every moment I spent waiting felt like an eternity. Finally, Maya received a tip from a mutual contact about a blockchain analyst who had been tracking suspicious crypto activity. This could be the breakthrough we needed. We arranged to meet with the analyst, hoping he could provide us with the evidence to solidify our case against Jordan. I felt a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty, but I knew we had to tread carefully. The stakes were high, and one misstep could ruin everything. As I sat across from the blockchain analyst, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. He was a wiry man with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, and I could tell he had seen more than his fair share of shady dealings. "So, you want to know about a crypto account linked to a stolen app?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, my heart racing. This was the moment that could turn everything around. The analyst pulled up a series of charts and transaction histories on his laptop, and I leaned in closer, my breath catching as he navigated through the data. This account has been receiving significant amounts of money, but what's more interesting is the pattern of transactions. They coincide with the launch of your roommate's app, he explained, his finger tracing a line on the screen. Each click felt like a nail being driven into Jordan's credibility, and I could hardly contain my excitement. As he detailed the flow of funds, I felt a mix of vindication and dread. The analyst had traced the money back to various exchanges, all leading to a web of accounts that screamed deceit. I scribbled down notes, my mind racing with how I could present this information to the startup community. This wasn't just about the money. It was about justice, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. When the meeting ended, I felt a surge of determination. Armed with this new evidence, I could no longer just be a passive observer in this betrayal. I needed to act, and soon. I reached out to Maya, who had been my rock through this ordeal, and we set up a meeting to strategize our next steps. We both knew that the upcoming startup event was the perfect stage to unveil the truth. Over the next few days, we meticulously planned how to present the information without appearing vindictive. Maya suggested creating a visual presentation that laid out the timeline of the app's development alongside the financial data we had gathered. I felt a sense of urgency. The closer we got to the event, the more anxious I became. Jordan had already manipulated the narrative once, and I couldn't let him do it again. As the event approached, I could sense the tension in the air. Every time I saw Jordan, I felt a mix of anger and pity. He seemed oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I caught glimpses of him rehearsing his pitch, exuding confidence that I now knew was built on a foundation of lies. The closer we got to the day of reckoning, the more the weight of my decision pressed down on me. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment of betrayal in my mind, every laugh we shared, every late-night brainstorming session. How could someone I once trusted so deeply turn into a stranger? I finally picked up my phone and sent Maya a message. "Are we really ready for this?" She replied almost instantly, "We have to be. This is for you, for us, and for everyone he's deceived." Her words grounded me, reminding me of the purpose behind this confrontation. The day of the event dawned, bright and bustling with energy. I arrived early, my nerves a jumble of excitement and dread. As I set up the presentation, I noticed Jordan mingling with other entrepreneurs, completely unaware of the impending storm. I could see the glint of ambition in his eyes, and it made my stomach churn. How could he stand there, so confidently, knowing what he had done? When it was finally time for him to present, I felt my heart race. I watched as he stood on stage, showcasing the app as if it was his brainchild. My palms were sweaty, but I held my ground, waiting for the right moment. As he spoke about innovation and vision, I felt the anger boiling inside me. This was it. I had to expose him now or risk letting this moment slip away. Just as he finished his pitch, I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "Excuse me, everyone," I called out, and the room fell silent, all eyes turning toward me. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the truth behind me. What Jordan just presented isn't just a new app. It's a stolen idea. I have evidence that shows he's been profiting from a crypto account linked directly to this app's earnings, and I can prove it. The room erupted in murmurs, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. I quickly shared the details, showing the transaction history on a screen. Gasps filled the air as the reality of the situation sank in. Jordan's face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his facade. He tried to regain control, but the room was no longer on his side. My heart raced as I realized the power of the moment. The startup community was finally seeing him for who he truly was. As I laid out the evidence, I noticed a few familiar faces in the crowd. People who had once supported Jordan. Their expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief, and I could feel the tide turning. I watched as whispers turned into pointed fingers, and I knew I had finally shattered the illusion he had built. Jordan attempted to spin a narrative, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the data spoke louder than his words. In the chaos that followed, I caught Maya's eye, and she gave me a nod of encouragement. This was a battle I had fought not just for myself, but for everyone who had been misled by Jordan's charm. I could see the startup community rallying, and I felt a surge of empowerment. The truth was finally out, and I had no intention of letting it slip away. As the event wound down, I could feel the weight of the world lifting from my shoulders. I had taken a stand, and it felt liberating. But as I glanced back at Jordan, I realized that this was just the beginning of his downfall. The community was turning against him, and I knew the consequences would be far-reaching. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was a person I once called a friend, now facing the consequences of his actions. The aftermath was swift. Within days, articles began to circulate about the incident, detailing the betrayal and the evidence I had presented. Jordan's reputation was in shambles, and I could see the social media fallout unfold in real time. I felt a sense of justice, but also a lingering sorrow for what had been lost. The startup world was unforgiving, and I couldn't help but wonder if he would ever recover from this. In the days that followed, I received messages of support from those who had witnessed the confrontation. Many reached out to share their own experiences of betrayal, and it felt good to connect with others who understood the weight of such a revelation. I realized that I wasn't alone in this fight. There were others who had faced similar struggles and had emerged stronger. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been wronged. Yet, as I moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Jordan might have lost his standing in the startup community, but I knew he would fight back in some way. The thrill of victory was tempered by the knowledge that the fallout would continue, and I had to remain vigilant. This battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The tension in the air was palpable as I stood before the crowd, my heart racing with a mix of fear and adrenaline. Jordan was up on stage, confidently presenting our app, my app, as if it were his brainchild. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly as I prepared to expose the truth that could shatter his facade and change everything for both of us. As he launched into the features and benefits of the app, I felt a wave of anger wash over me. Every word he spoke felt like a stab to my gut, a betrayal that echoed in the back of my mind. I had spent countless sleepless nights perfecting this idea, pouring my heart and soul into it, only for him to stand there, basking in the glory that should have been mine. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. I stepped forward, interrupting him mid-sentence. "Jordan, wait. You're not being honest with everyone here. This app, this entire presentation, is built on a lie." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward me, confusion etched on their faces. I could see Jordan's expression shift from surprise to a calculated calm, but I pressed on. I pulled out my phone, showing the hidden crypto account linked to the app's earnings. "This is the real story. I found this account connected to your name, and it proves you've been profiting off my idea without my consent. You think you could just take what's mine and twist it into your own success?" Gasps rippled through the audience as murmurs began to spread like wildfire. Jordan's face paled, but he quickly regained his composure. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to sabotage my success because you're jealous." His voice was louder now, filled with feigned indignation. I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he attempted to manipulate the narrative, but I was ready for him. I had already anticipated his defense, and I wasn't going to let him spin this. I gestured to the crowd, pointing out familiar faces from our startup community. These people trusted us. They believed in this project, in us. But how can they trust you when you've built your success on my hard work? I could feel the weight of their scrutiny, their judgment, and I knew I had them on my side. The tide was turning, and it felt exhilarating. As the murmurs grew louder, I could see the cracks in Jordan's facade. He shifted uncomfortably, his confidence slipping away. I continued, revealing more details about the fake identity he had used to launch the app. "You didn't just steal my idea. You created a whole new persona to hide behind. How can anyone believe a word you say?" The crowd was now fully engaged, some nodding in agreement while others looked shocked. Jordan's expression morphed from anger to desperation, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for him. But I couldn't let that distract me. This was about justice, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Finally, I turned to the audience, my voice steady and clear. "I'm not here to destroy anyone's career, but I can't stand by while my work is taken from me. I just want what's fair, and I hope you all understand that. This is a community built on trust, and trust has been broken today." The reaction was immediate. People began to stand, some clapping, others whispering amongst themselves. I could see Jordan's face flush with anger and embarrassment, his earlier bravado shattered. He tried to speak, but the crowd drowned him out, the momentum clearly shifting away from him. In the aftermath, I could hear the conversations buzzing around me. Some were supportive, others were critical of Jordan, questioning his integrity. The startup community had rallied, and it felt like a collective decision was being made about who they would support moving forward. Jordan's reputation was crumbling before my eyes, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. As the event wrapped up, I noticed Jordan slip away, his shoulders hunched, his defeat palpable. I had won this battle, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the war had taken a toll on both of us. I had lost a friend, someone I once trusted completely, and I knew the fallout would linger long after this moment. In the following weeks, the consequences for Jordan became evident. He faced professional ostracism, and I heard whispers of investors pulling out of projects he was involved in. It was a harsh reality, but I had to remind myself that his choices led him here. I had to focus on rebuilding my own reputation and moving forward. I immersed myself in my work, determined to not let this setback define me. I reached out to the startup community, sharing my story and seeking collaboration on new projects. Slowly, I regained their trust, proving that my ideas were worth investing in. But every now and then, I'd catch wind of Jordan's struggles, and it weighed on me. One day, I received a message from him. It was short and to the point. He wanted to meet. I hesitated, my heart torn between anger and empathy. I had moved on, but part of me felt a responsibility to address the situation head on. I agreed to meet, curious about what he would say after everything that had happened. When we sat down, the tension was thick. Jordan looked different, worn down by the fallout of his actions. He apologized genuinely and admitted that he had let his ambition cloud his judgment. I listened, surprised by the vulnerability he showed. It was a small step, but it felt like the first crack in the wall between us. As we talked, I realized that while I couldn't erase what he had done, there was a possibility for closure. I didn't want to carry this resentment anymore. We both had lessons to learn, and while I wasn't ready to forgive completely, I could acknowledge the growth we both needed. It was a bittersweet moment, but a necessary one. In the end, I walked away from that meeting feeling lighter. I had confronted my past, and while the scars remained, they no longer felt like chains holding me back. I had a future to build, and I was ready to embrace it, no matter how daunting it seemed. Thanks so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed our videos, please like, share, and subscribe to the Llama if you want more drama. It truly means a lot.